Scientific research into quantum mechanics shows that at the very essence of atoms, at their smallest possible observable scale, they are mostly empty space, with electrons disappearing and reappearing in and out of material form according to a specific wave pattern of probability and centering around the nucleus of the atom. This is distinctly different to the Newtonian model of an atom, which describes the particle, or material or matter, as orbiting around a nucleus in a regular manner. This suggests that everything is in perpetual motion, vibrating to a wave pattern, a frequency. The wave pattern of potential energy represents the possibility or the likeliness of how a particle will form in the material dimension. The frequency of the wave pattern or the wavelength is its inherent characteristic. How matter forms is dependent on the relationship between the level of consciousness or frequency of the conscious energy field around us and the consciousness of which the being or beings are composed of, which interact with it. All things in this time-space reality have an individual frequency embedded into their own radiation template, their spirit body. This is the dark matter template existing beyond our perception, an adjacent dimension, which all beings possess as part of their energetic anatomy within this lower dimensional frequency band. As such, it represents the available quantum for the individual in material form to draw on for its life support energy during the course of its physical existence and separation from the whole within the time matrix structure. Beliefs are thought patterns and ultimately determine what you and we individually and collectively experience. The thoughts you have now in this current dimensional frequency band are in effect interacting with and gathering the necessary quantum together from the unified energy field at a slightly higher dimensional band of frequency than our current level of consciousness, and beginning to assemble that higher frequency energy into our perception range for our consciousness to perceive or experience as solid matter. Science observes that a clustering of likeness occurs within certain human behaviours. They do not really give any scientific reasoning for this, but to my mind and intuition, it seems quite reasonable to suggest that this is precisely because those who resonate at a specific frequency draw to themselves that same frequency. This clustering was noted on the Infinite Monkey Cage podcast. Monkeys cannot see the bars of the cage in front of them because their limited perception cannot reach outside to see beyond them. When we change perspective, we perceive the bars which hold us, and we can then find a way to move beyond them. A simple tuning fork experiment shows that a vibrating fork at one pitch will inevitably influence or entrain a similar vibrating fork, but of a lower frequency, to the energy of that higher pitch, unless the gap between the individual frequencies is too great. They are inevitably separated by their differences. Crystals characteristically have a very stable frequency and are used in various technologies for this reason, computers, phones and watches for example. This is the principle behind crystal holistic healing. The crystal placed in the energetic field of the subject entrains the personal electromagnetic field or aura to the frequency of the crystal. The lower frequency of the unwanted condition can no longer be sustained within the higher frequency energetic field of the subject because the difference between the two frequencies are too great. The intention to entrain to that higher frequency means that the individual becomes a higher frequency version of self, thereby separating themselves from the lower, unwanted frequency of self. The game is a game of two halves, so they say. When scientific analysis only takes account of what is actually in material form, it is missing a vast area of understanding, which, although it is not necessarily the business of science as we understand it in the material reductionist sense, by sticking rigidly to outdated disciplines which disregard the entirety and meaningfulness of the whole human experience, it is as good as playing only half the game. It's a half-brainer. By being only concerned with what can be measured or seen and evaluated with technological instruments, as seemingly marvelous as they are, it still denies the entirety of the whole picture, the holistic view. A purely logical construct of evaluation is missing out. True science has a spiritual foundation, and true spirituality is intrinsically connected to the laws of energy within a universal structure. Ironically, by the law of attraction, we could say that the scientists have attracted to themselves the tantalizingly observable effect of dark matter, and the understanding that the vast majority of our universe is comprised of this unknown presence, which is in effect a reflection of themselves, teaching them that within their own marvelous human instrument, the larger part of themselves is left undiscovered and unaccounted for. If you're not in your right mind, you're left behind. Frequency is the language of the universe. The universal structure is comprised of bands of frequency known as dimensions. Frequency underlies the fundamental nature of everything within a universal structure, since we are consciousness and consciousness is energy. Frequency bands of consciousness, that is to say, dimensions, give us a guiding framework to explore our conscious experiences within. The consciousness is called forward by and in conjunction with the dimensional structure of the time matrix or the time-space platform, and forms the fundamental blueprint for the evolution of human consciousness. We are known to be made from atoms, all of which are in a perpetual state of resonant frequency or oscillation. The rate at which these atoms or subatomic particles vibrate or oscillate determines the nature or the substance of the thing of which they are a part. How you conduct yourself energetically determines the nature of the reality which you consciously experience. As your consciousness evolves, you transcend dimensional frequency bands and draw more experiences from a higher level of dimensional potential. This is the evolution of consciousness, and this is your inevitable eternal destiny. If we accept that we are conscious energy and energy is formed into frequency bands by the dimensional levels of awareness, then all aspects of ourselves are attuned to these bands of frequency as we perpetually engage with them for our evolution. Our emotional body, or that part of our consciousness which experiences through the medium of emotion, is also keyed or tuned to the lower dimensional structure. However, it seems that we have a very wide and fluid emotional experiential capacity, meaning that we can feel up and down in relatively short time frames. Indeed, specific emotional states have a resonant frequency in themselves. What we call a low-frequency emotional experience would be likened to the state of depression, despair, guilt, jealousy, or shame. A mid-range emotional vibrational experience would be that of anger, blame, worry, doubt, frustration, and boredom. And the higher vibrational emotional states are of hopefulness, joy, gratitude, love, and freedom. It could be said that emotions, whilst giving us a very rich experience and perspective, are in a sense an interruption of our equilibrium and highest natural frequency expression, which is that of unconditional love. When we become unconditionally loving to all things, we have the potential energy to transcend to higher states of being which are currently inaccessible as a collective due to the very obvious and continuing vibrational disharmony we create daily by what we think and what we do. We can think of our natural harmony as an oscillation frequency pattern of coherence, whereas vibration is a disturbance or interference pattern in our natural oscillation, which disrupts the calm. Like still waters having natural calm, its natural state, but with a stone thrown in, ripples are made which disrupts the equilibrium of the natural state. We can liken our emotions to vibrations which disturb the equilibrium of the natural state of harmony. Density is a grouping of dimensions within our universal energy structure which encompasses 3 levels of dimensional conscious experience. For example, we are currently mostly engaged with, as a species, the first level of density that includes dimensions 1, 2, and 3. And we are transitioning into the second density level, dimensions 4, 5 and 6. Our emotional experiences within these bands of frequency can be thought of as being very dense or heavy. Sometimes we refer to a person with a lack of intelligence or poor attitude as being thick, correlating to being very dense. Density also pertains to solidity. If we want to improve our human experience as a species and as individuals, we must take responsibility for the way we conduct ourselves and our lives. This would be in relation to ourselves and each other. We learn to love our own selves to be able to be our better, harmonious selves for the benefit of others, which becomes a reflection and a point of attraction back to us, so we in turn are loved and appreciated on the external perception. By working on the internal plane of consciousness experience, we change the external experience too. If you have become aware of this higher possible reality, this higher consciousness, then it is within your capacity to access that higher consciousness. But first, to experience it in your reality, you must become it. One of the most famous spiritual leaders in the Eastern cultures clearly understood this fundamental principle of existence. Mahatma Gandhi said, "Be the change you want to see." By the law of attraction, you draw to yourself that which you are most alike. So if you want to be loved, then you be loving to all things. If you want people to be generous, then you be generous to all things. If you want a calm life, then you cultivate the calm within you by taking the necessary steps towards that. If you want to feel higher planes of consciousness, you become your higher conscious acting with higher conscious intention.